Hello there, my young friends. Mr. Johnson here. Hi, here I am, overwhelmed with my own nerdosity, thinking that I should make some sort of effort to provide you with somewhat of a review over some of these Canterbury Pilgrims that we're covering, that we're working our way through over 7, 8 class periods, really. I'm not going to read, and for many of you that would be reread, every single line of their character descriptions. But what I will do is go through each of these characters and kind of reread some of the key lines that maybe I pointed out to you in class, or I'm in the process of pointing out to you in class, and kind of giving you what those notes were and are. You've taken these notes if you were in class. If you've missed class, this should help. If you're currently having to be quarantined, this can be very useful to you as far as reading through these pilgrims and not having to read through them on your own. I will be providing the notes for those of you who are out for COVID, for quarantine. I can provide for you a copy of my notes, but this also can help to where you can do the reading and kind of take your own notes as well, which can just really help you to be as ready as you can be. These are not ideal circumstances, but we're all just doing the best that we can do in the situation. And I think using these YouTube videos, I can hopefully, with my 26 years now of pretend teaching experience of these pilgrims, that I can hopefully do a decent job of getting a good review to you, or even just getting information to you if this is your first read through. In this particular video, I'm going to cover the first 3, the knight, the squire, and the yeoman, who happen to be traveling together anyway for this Canterbury pilgrimage. So starting with the knight, it's on page 106, starts in, his character description starts in line 43. I'm going to start with lines 45 and 46. To ride abroad had followed chivalry, truth, honor, generousness, and courtesy. This knight was very devoted to following the code of chivalry. Last 2 lines on page 106 as and ridden into battle no man more, as well as in Christian as in heathen places. And again, we know that this knight is a very successful knight. He has fought in numerous battles in the Crusades. He has fought in the Crusades. It's mentioned at the top of page 107, lines 52, 53. He often sat at table in the chair of honor above all nations. This is a very distinguished, very successful knight in the military. In line 63 through 65, in 15 mortal battles he had been, jousted for our faith at Tramacin, thrice in the lists, and always killed his man. It's important to note about this particular knight that he has fought in numerous life and death battles, and he's actually had to take lives before. In line 70, 71, it says, and though so much distinguished, he was wise, and in his bearing modest as a maid. It is useful to note with this particular knight that he carries himself with a great deal of humility. He is very modest. The other characters on this trip are very likely wanting him to discuss a lot of his battles and kind of brag, and it's not the way he carries himself. Part of the chivalry is this code of just proper behavior and being a genteel man, a gentleman, and he carries himself with great humility. Chaucer says in line 74 that he was a true, perfect, gentle knight. Chaucer comes right out and says he thinks this guy is the perfect example of what a knight should be. That is very rare among all these character descriptions, where Chaucer sometimes lets you infer for yourself what he really thinks of them. Sometimes he's kind of taking shots at them in various ways. This guy comes out and says he just thinks he is a great example of knighthood. Last thing about your knight, lines 77, 78, it talks about what he's wearing. He wore a fustian tunic stained and dark with smudges where his armor had left mark. We know this knight wore a cloak that it was stained by his armor, and it's very much in his personality to not have on a new cloak, a new fresh-looking cloak. He's wearing the cloak that he wore under his armor, and you can almost see part of his personality is that armor, even though he isn't wearing it. That is the knight, as described by Geoffrey Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales. The next character is his son, the Squire. The Squire's description starts in line 107, on page 107, line 81, where Chaucer starts by saying he had his son with him, a fine young squire. For the squire's description, lines 83 and 84, it mentions that he had locks as curly as if they'd been pressed. He was some 20 years of age, I guessed. We get a picture of this young squire being about 20 years old and having very curly hair. Line 86 says he has wonderful agility and strength. It's clear that he is a very athletic young knight. It also says in the next line, line 87, he had seen some service with the cavalry, even as a squire, which is a knight in training, a young knight in training. This particular squire, because his father is a very successful knight, has had the opportunity to fight in some battles and get a little battle experience, more so than just training or trying to simulate training. He's done a little fighting. Line 91, 92, he was embroidered like a meadow bright and full of freshest flowers, red and white. He is very kind of brightly dressed in his clothes, which is a contrast to his father, who's wearing an armor-stained cloak. Line 93, it says he was singing or fluting all the day. Over on page 108, line 97, it says he could make songs and poems and recite. We see that this young squire is very musically talented. He can write songs, he can play an instrument. And it seems that part of why maybe he's using these skills is to try to impress the ladies. Lines 99 and 100 says he loved so hotly that till dawn grew pale, he slept as little as a nightingale. That maybe he's writing these songs, these poems, and he's doing this music to try to make an impression on the ladies, and he sleeps very little. And maybe unbeknownst to his father, because as a young squire, he should be maybe early to bed, because it's early to rise. He has to get up and do lots of trainings and things. But he sleeps very little, and it seems that his pursuit of the ladies is as important to him as his pursuit of knighthood. Last couple of lines about the squire. It mentions that courteous he was, lowly and serviceable, and carved to serve his father at the table. This young squire really knows how to play the role of the son of a great knight, and he knows how to have this persona of being very devoted to chivalry. So he can kind of play both ends. He's has the appearance of being dedicated to the code, but he also, maybe in his spare time or in his other time, is in the pursuit of the ladies. But he knows how to play the part. That, my friends, is the squire. The last character in this little section to look at is the yeoman, who travels with the knight and the squire. A yeoman, by definition, is an apprentice. An attendant to a nobleman. This yeoman happens to be an attendant, be a servant for the knight on this trip. As a yeoman, he would probably do things like make sure that the knight's armor is always together, his sword and all of his equipment, and just always ready to roll. And that's a pretty good job for him as a servant here in this society, this feudal society. The knight and the squire and the yeoman are all part of the feudal class. Line 103 is where the description of the yeoman begins. In line 105, it says this yeoman wore a coat and hood of green. We see that he wore a green coat, almost kind of camo, because he's outdoors a lot. And peacock feathered arrows, bright and keen. Line 106 is where it mentions that. He's an archer. He's got on this green coat, but has arrows just right there in their quiver, and it's very much a part of his appearance. Also, let's see, line 110, in his hand he bore a mighty bow. Line 113, he has a saucy brace on his arm to ward it from the bowstring. So he's carrying this bow, he's got this brace on his arm, he's got these arrows. He very much has the gear and the appearance to look like a skilled archer, and he's very, very good at archery, obviously, with the bow and the arrow. Line 111, 112, his head was like a nut, his face was brown, he knew the whole of woodcraft up and down. He's got a dark complexion, which is maybe unique on this trip, where there are a lot of these British clergyman types. You have your nuns and your priests and things who spend a lot of time indoors and maybe aren't as dark complexioned. But he stands out a little bit because he's an outdoorsman, spends all of his time outdoors, so he's got a darker complexion than some of the others. In line 116, it mentions that he's also carrying a jaunty dirk, spear sharp and well equipped. He's got his dagger ready to roll. And lastly, it says in line 117, a medal of St. Christopher he wore. He's wearing this medal, which is the medal for the patron saint of travelers, because he does lots and lots of traveling, and that's very much a part of his code and his faith, is to wear the St. Christopher medal. That is the Yeoman, and here, my friends, were little summaries of the feudal class members, the knight and the squire and the yeoman. I hope that's a little bit helpful to you as you try to do some review of these characters. Did the best that I could. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.